Gold. Entire caravans covered in it. Camels carrying it across one of the harshest deserts on Earth. A king so wealthy that when he entered a foreign city, the price of gold collapsed. More than 700 years later, historians still debate exactly how rich he was. But they all agree on one thing: no one has ever come close. Welcome to Hidden Earth, where we uncover the world's forgotten places, incredible mysteries, and true stories that are stranger than fiction. Today, we're traveling back to the 14th century to meet the man many historians consider the richest person who has ever lived. His name was Mansa Musa, and if his wealth were measured by today's standards, it may have been worth hundreds of billions of dollars, perhaps even more. To understand how one man accumulated such unimaginable wealth, we first have to travel to West Africa. Long before European explorers arrived on the continent, powerful kingdoms were rising across the region. Among them was the Mali Empire. At its peak, the empire stretched across much of modern-day Mali, Senegal, Guinea, Niger, Mauritania, and several neighboring countries. It controlled one of the most valuable resources on Earth: gold. During the 14th century, gold wasn't just used for jewelry, it was money. Kings built kingdoms with it. Merchants crossed continents to trade for it. Entire economies depended on it. And the Mali Empire possessed an astonishing share of the world's known gold supply. Some historians estimate that nearly half of the world's gold came from mines controlled by Mali. That alone made the empire incredibly wealthy. Then came Mansa Musa. The title Mansa means king or emperor. When Musa took the throne around the year 1312, he inherited one of the richest empires on Earth. But inheriting wealth wasn't enough. He expanded trade routes, strengthened cities, encouraged education, and transformed Mali into one of the most influential empires of its time. Yet for years, much of the outside world knew almost nothing about him. That changed in 1324. At the age of about 40, Mansa Musa began one of the most famous journeys in history, a pilgrimage to Mecca. For Muslims, completing the Hajj at least once during their lifetime is one of the faith's most sacred traditions. The journey from Mali to Mecca covered nearly 4,000 miles, crossing deserts, mountains, and foreign kingdoms. It would take months. Most pilgrims traveled with only what they could carry. Mansa Musa had something very different in mind. He assembled a caravan unlike anything the world had ever seen. Historical accounts describe tens of thousands of people traveling with him: soldiers, officials, servants, scholars, merchants, even enslaved workers. Leading the procession were dozens of camels, each one carrying hundreds of pounds of pure gold. Imagine standing along a dusty road and watching this caravan approach. The line of travelers stretched beyond the horizon. Bright fabrics shimmered in the desert sun, gold reflected from every direction. To the people witnessing it, it must have looked less like a pilgrimage and more like an empire on the move. As the caravan crossed North Africa, crowds gathered just to watch it pass. Word spread rapidly. A king from a distant land was traveling with unimaginable riches. Every city wanted to welcome him. Every ruler wanted to meet him. And no stop would become more famous than Cairo. At the time, Cairo was one of the wealthiest and most important cities in the world. Its markets bustled with merchants from Europe, Asia, and Africa. Its scholars attracted students from across the Islamic world. Its rulers were accustomed to hosting kings, but they had never seen anyone like Mansa Musa. What happened next became one of the most famous economic stories in history. Not because he conquered the city, not because he declared war, but because he gave away so much gold that he accidentally changed the economy of an entire region. As Mansa Musa traveled through Cairo, he gave away gold with astonishing generosity. He donated to the poor. He presented lavish gifts to government officials. He rewarded merchants. He funded mosques and charitable causes. Wherever he went, gold seemed to flow freely. To those receiving it, it felt like unimaginable generosity. But there was one problem. Gold, like anything else, becomes less valuable when there's suddenly much more of it. Within weeks, so much gold had entered Cairo's economy that its value began to fall. Prices shifted, markets were disrupted, and merchants struggled to adjust. Historians believe the effects lasted for years. It's one of the earliest recorded examples of inflation caused by a single individual's spending. Imagine one person becoming so wealthy that they accidentally influence the economy of an entire region. That's the scale of Mansa Musa's fortune. By the time he completed his pilgrimage to Mecca, stories about the wealthy emperor had spread across the known world. European mapmakers began placing the King of Mali on their maps, often depicting him seated on a golden throne while holding an enormous gold nugget in his hand. To people who had never visited West Africa, he became a symbol of unimaginable wealth. But Mansa Musa's legacy wasn't built on gold alone. When he returned home, he invested heavily in his empire. He commissioned magnificent mosques. He encouraged architects, artists, and scholars to travel to Mali. He expanded trade and strengthened relationships with neighboring kingdoms. Most importantly, he transformed the city of Timbuktu into one of the greatest centers of learning in the medieval world. Today, many people think of Timbuktu as simply meaning the middle of nowhere. In reality, it was once one of the world's greatest cities. Students traveled thousands of miles to study there. Its libraries housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts covering mathematics, astronomy, medicine, law, literature, and religion. While much of Europe was still emerging from the Middle Ages, Timbuktu had become a thriving center of education and culture. Mansa Musa understood something many rulers never do. True wealth isn't measured only by what you own, it's measured by what you build. So just how rich was he? That's surprisingly difficult to answer. Modern billionaires own companies whose values rise and fall with the stock market. Mansa Musa controlled an empire that produced enormous quantities of one of the most valuable resources on Earth. Trying to convert that into today's dollars is nearly impossible. Some estimates place his fortune at around $400 billion. Others argue no modern comparison is accurate. The simple truth is that his wealth was so vast, historians cannot calculate it with confidence. And perhaps that's the most remarkable fact of all. More than 7 centuries later, no one knows exactly how rich the richest man in history really was. Today, the Mali Empire no longer exists. Many of its great cities have changed. Its trade routes have faded into history. But Mansa Musa's story still survives. Not because of the gold he carried across the Sahara, but because of the civilization he helped build. His journey reminds us that history isn't only shaped by conquerors and wars. Sometimes it's shaped by a single traveler whose generosity became legendary and whose wealth became almost impossible to imagine. Thanks for joining us on another journey across hidden Earth. If this story fascinated you, there are countless more waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe for more documentary-style stories from around the world and continue your journey by watching the next episode on your screen. Until next time, keep exploring.